Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. So today we are going to be finishing up our season preview videos. I know. It's taken a little while longer than I would have liked, but we are going to be finishing up our all 32 NHL teams going into this season. My kind of preseason preview, where I think they're going to be, their roster. Looking at the forwards, defense, goaltending. Look at all those videos, of course, when you're done with this one. And of course, if you're a Jets fan, you're probably going to just watch this one. But if you're interested, maybe teams in your division, in your conference, how do you stack up against some of these other groups, even just looking across the league, I kind of give it 9 to 10 minutes, kind of snippet of each NHL team. So make sure to check out those other videos. I'll have that playlist at the end of this video. So once you watch the end of this, it'll be right there for you at your convenience. So let's get into it. Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Jets. Interesting group because last season they did really well, but once they got to the playoffs, it was a similar narrative. And even though the regular season success kind of made you feel like something was going to be different for the Jets, they ultimately came up short in the postseason. So, looking at this team up front, let's start with the forwards. Let's take a look. So, your top line is Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Gabe Vilardi. I really like that forward line right there. That's a good first line. And obviously Kyle Connor and Scheifele are really the big pieces there, but Vilardi has kind of proven himself to be a name in the NHL and really making a name for himself now in Winnipeg. There's a guy that I think they're expecting a lot from. They want to see him do well there. Obviously, they made a pretty big trade for him with the Los Angeles Kings a few years ago, so they want him to do well. And I think that when you look at the second line and the rest of this group, there's obviously room for movement, even for Vilardi if he wants to. Eventually they try to maybe move him back to center on another line. They'll probably be able to do that. So look at the second line. You've got Nikolai Ehlers, Vladislav Nemesnikov, and Cole Perfetti. So there's a lot of guys here that could all pretty much play center. Perfetti could play center. Nemesnikov, Vilardi, all those guys could play center. So like I said, this is very interchangeable. This is all according to Daily Faceoff. That's what I used for this entire season preview series. So things can very quickly change before we get to opening night of the regular season. But I think this is a pretty serviceable line. There's obviously a hole there. Nemesnikov is good, but is he a second line center on a cup contending team like Winnipeg hopes to be? I don't know about that. I don't know about that one bit. So we'll see. This is one that could end up being kind of a boom or bust. But I think for a team right now like Winnipeg, you're just looking for somebody that can just take that role and run with it. And that will be an opening that is something that's probably going to be, like I said, hopefully they find someone that could just take that spot and run with it. And whether it's Perfetti or Vilardi or Nemesnikov, they just figure it out and get it done. And I think that's one of the weaknesses of this team. So we'll see. Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton. I actually really like that third line. Adam Lowry, it seems like he's been there forever, and he has. But I really like him being there. Niederreiter's going to add some depth goal scoring, especially in the playoffs. He'll come up big with that big overtime goal that maybe sends you to the next round, right? They were hoping for that last year. Didn't really get much of that, but Niederreiter's a really good player there, and he's talk about a veteran that can score goals. Niederreiter really fills that void quite nicely for them. And the rest of this group at the on the fourth line, you've got Morgan Barron, Rasmus Kupari, and Alex Iafallo. All those guys, in my opinion, those guys can kill penalties. They can score goals. Rasmus Kupari, I think they're hoping could eventually jump up the lineup a little bit, but he's going to have to earn it. And I think that, when they brought in Kupari, they knew what they were getting from him. So I think there's a guy that could move up the lineup. I really like him. I think he was one of the guys that probably got the most screwed in that trade with the Kings, right? But I think he's found a way to make the most out of this situation going to Winnipeg. And like I said, penalty killer. He can jump on the power play if need be. The reality is for this forward group, it's going to run a lot on the younger guys, and that's where the concern kind of is, because if they're young and don't have a ton of experience, how do they do over a full 82-game schedule and being the guy to score goals? And yes, you have Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers, and Niederreiter, but you want to see something from the younger guys like Vilardi and Perfetti. They're going to rely a lot on those guys this season. Looking at the defense, I would say that's one of the strengths of the Jets over the last couple of years. I think that's going to continue again this year. We saw the return, seemingly, of Josh Morrissey. A lot of people recognized him. He was in the running for the Norris Trophy very early in the season. He was a scoring machine, it seemed like. Things obviously dropped a little bit as the season went along, but so did the rest of the team there in Winnipeg. So I guess that's kind of indicative of maybe his play falling off a little bit, or which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was the reason the Jets started to fall off was because Morrissey's play diminished from where it was in the beginning, or was he just a kind of a benefactor of the rest of the team doing well? And I would say it's probably the latter of the two. But either way, I'm really excited to see Morrissey again this season because he is a really solid defenseman. Dylan DeMello, maybe playing a little bit above his grade, but the way he plays with Morrissey on that top pair, it works. And reminds me a lot of like Mo Sider and what they had with Jake Wallman. Like Dylan DeMello is kind of that Jake Wallman. Like he's on the top pair. Why is he playing there? But they just have chemistry and it just works. So I'm expecting that to continue again this season there. Dylan Sandberg and Neil Pionk is your second pair. Serviceable. I like that a lot. I think Sandberg is a guy that a lot of people are kind of wondering, like, how is that guy going to do? And Neil Pionk, as long as he can stay healthy, he's a good player there. That's a guy that's a top four defenseman, right? That's why we like the Jets defense, is guys like Neil Pionk in there. You know what you're getting, right? And then the third pair, you've got Colin Miller, who comes in. I love that addition. That is probably one of the biggest additions to this Jets team this offseason. I think Colin Miller is one of those guys that he reminds me a lot of like Ian Cole. Utah brought in Ian Cole this summer, and not a lot of people talk about that, right? Because they're too busy talking about Sergachev and Marino coming in. And I think for the Jets, they didn't have nearly as much action in terms of moves that they made, but Colin Miller is a very good defenseman, and playing alongside Logan Stanley, that is going to be a pain in the ass defense to go up against. That's a big defense between DeMello and Pionk, Sandberg, Miller, and Stanley. Morrissey is, I would say, the only smaller defenseman. So this is a team that has, I think there was a big gap last year in terms of the Eastern and the Western Conference teams on defense. It seemed like the defensemen on the Western Conference, whether it was Vegas or LA, I'm trying to think of these other teams, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Colorado. I'm just going to start rattling off teams, but you get the point. A lot of these teams had size on the blue line and speed. And I think Winnipeg is one of those teams that does that combination of both extraordinarily well. So with the Jets, are they necessarily going to have the success they had last season? I think there will be a slight regression from where they were last year, but that's not really an indictment on this team. They just seemed like everything went perfectly early on in the season for the Jets. And they got hot at the right time, which meant they got cold at the wrong time. And I think for the Jets, if they were able to just kind of steadily move along and then get a hot streak and some momentum into the playoffs, that shot in the arm toward the end of the season would have helped them out. It just seemed like they were regressing as the playoffs kind of came closer and closer. So, this year I think that's going to be at their mind a little bit. The defense is legit. You've got Connor Hellebuck, who we know how good Connor Hellebuck is. The question is, are they going to get enough goal scoring? And if they can get enough goal scoring, they can score on the power play, kind of dictate play in that regard, they're going to be okay. But there's a team that does give me some concern about that goal scoring depth. Are they going to be able to score enough goals, right? So with that said, I still think very highly of this team, and in no regard is 101 points an indictment on this team. The Central Division, I think, is going to be a little bit more competitive this year. I think the gap is going to come a little closer. I think Utah's going to do a little better. The Blackhawks, they're not going to be a playoff team, don't worry, but I think they're going to be a little better than they were last year, right? They've been horrible the last couple years. And then you've got teams like St. Louis, Minnesota that are also in the mix. I do believe Winnipeg is still better than those teams, but I don't think they're as good as some of these other teams like Colorado, Dallas, and Nashville. I think those teams are still better than Winnipeg, but that's still a pretty good season for the Jets. Get to the playoffs, and whatever you do in the playoffs, that's kind of what matters from there. So, with that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much if you've been watching this whole playlist of season preview videos. It's been rough. I apologize, guys. I tried to get these videos out a little bit sooner, earlier in this, in the off season, so that way when the preseason begins, you're ready. But a lot's been going on in my personal life. It's been extremely busy. As the season comes in, my schedule is going to lighten up a little bit than compared to what I've been dealing with. So I'm going to have bags under my eyes during live streams. I'm going to have bags on my eyes during, videos like this during the week. But I'm going to try, once we get back to the season, I will be back to one video per day. And once we have more stuff to talk about, I think it's going to be a little bit easier and more free-flowing than the way things have been right now. I feel like these videos are kind of forced. So once we get into action, I'm going to start to talk about more what I want to talk about. And I'm excited for that. So if you've stuck around this long in today's video, thank you. Thank you a lot. And like I said, maybe you haven't watched the rest of these videos. Make sure to watch the rest of our season preview videos because the season is approaching. And if you want a little deep dive, kind of a, between an 8 to 10 minute kind of snippet of each NHL team going into this season, some of the moves that have happened to some of these teams, additions, subtractions, my predictions for the playoffs, we're going to discuss all of that. And of course, I'm going to be doing my preseason rankings coming up here very shortly, so stay tuned for that here at the end of the week. I'm very excited for that. I already have it kind of laid out, but I might move a couple teams here and there, so get ready for that. Guys, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.